Hi, I'm Dan Kubisky, co-chair of the Society of Professional Journalists International Community. All right, with us today is Gavin Phipps, who's the morning news anchor at ICRT, the English language radio station in Taiwan. Nicely enough, I worked there for a while, many, many years ago. So it's really nice to have you on board, Gavin. Thank you.
Good day.
There's a lot of people in the US, mostly academics and military planners, who are looking at the Russian invasion of Ukraine in the same way that they're trying to equate that invasion with possible actions of China against Taiwan, big neighbor against smaller neighbor. So I was just wondering, what's the sense like in Taiwan from the people on the street, the government people that you talk to and work with every day in your job as a journalist?
Well, shortly after Russia invaded, the government was quick to come out and sort of dismiss the likeness between the Russian invasion of Ukraine and China's possible invasion of Taiwan. They said, okay, it's a bigger country invading a smaller country, but that's where the likeness ends, because the geopolitical situations are different. And of course, as the experts have been pointing out, usually in the first sentence of their article, Taiwan is an island, which makes it's not quite the land issue there. There's an island, there's a waterway in the way, if you see what I mean. It's not just moving forces across a land area. And of course, in the US government has also come out and said there should be no equation between Russia, Ukraine, and Taiwan, China, because they're completely different things. So that even the US government has been very quick to come out and say there's likeness in a way, but most, you can't really say it's all the same.
Okay, so, but has the war had an impact in Taiwan? I mean, other than people just trying to make equations that some experts are saying is valid and others saying not valid. What's going on in Taiwan in reaction to the invasion?
Well, the government was very quick to come out with donation efforts. There was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs had a donation drive where people could take medications and other stuff to its big building in Taipei, its main office in Taipei. And they shipped those goods to Poland and other Eastern European countries for sending out to Ukrainian refugees that had entered those countries, such as Poland. There's been private donations as well. Local groups have also been raising money, which has been sent to other European countries and Taiwan representative offices there for distribution to Ukrainian refugees. And also the government has been giving money to Poland and several other Eastern European countries to help set up like a kindergarten. Last week, the government gave money to a kindergarten in Slovakia, which was hosting Ukrainian refugees. There's been smaller drives like that.
Okay, so it sounds like they're joining in with the rest of the world and doing what they can to help the refugees.
Yeah, the government. There was also like two or 3 days after the invasion, there was protests outside the Russian trade office in Taipei. They started off quite small. There was a handful of Ukrainian expats living in Taiwan, were joined by some human rights groups here, and they protested outside the office. I think it was every day for about a week to start with. These protests went on. And then it was reported that the office had actually closed. So, they were doing their bit, but no staff from the office was going to work and seeing the protests. These protests, when it first started, they didn't target the Russian people here, the representative here. One of the organizers of these protests in the early stage did tell me that they weren't targeting Russian nationals specifically. They were protesting Putin's invasion of Ukraine and not Russian nationals. And also many Russian nationals here did join these protests.
Okay.
The protests since the early days have become quite large now. I mean, they've moved away from outside the now shuttered representative office, and they've moved on to, if you remember your time in Taiwan, we had the Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall. Big plaza, big public plaza. It's now called the Liberty Plaza because they renamed the actual square, but that's another matter. Anyway, they've had larger ones there in recent weeks. Sort of every couple of Saturdays, they've had them there. There was one last week. The most recent one was this past weekend.
Okay.
And they've also had similar protests and rallies in other cities, in Taichung, in Kaohsiung, and in Hsinchu, organized by the same groups.
Okay. Wow.
And they've
Okay.
been trying to.
So it's across the island that there's these demonstrations at this point.
Well, like I said, they started off as demonstrations and they transpired into like raise awareness about the situation in Ukraine, raise awareness about how the people in Ukraine are suffering. And also the organizers were also calling on people in Taiwan to sort of boycott Russian goods and to call on local companies not to supply whatever they're doing, toilet plungers to semiconductors to Russia, to stop trading with Russia.
Oh, okay. All right. I mean, thank you. That was a wonderful, very quick summary, and I do appreciate it. I just have one last question, not related to Russia, Ukraine, China. We all know Taiwan has a strong, vibrant, free press. Is the situation still good for free and independent journalists there?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go back to the Ukraine war, the local TV cable news channels usually, of course, don't cover international events. You know, Joe Biden gets off an airplane in such a country, they'll give it about a minute. You know, there's an election in such and such a country, they'll give it about a minute. But the Russia-Ukraine invasion is basically blanket news, especially in the morning when there's less news to broadcast. The morning television community, the chat shows, the punditry shows where the pundits go on and give their opinions. There's one I have in the morning on in the studio behind me every day, and that's just 1 hour long. And all they talk about is the latest in Ukraine. And of course, the regular hourly newscasts also cover, they give a good 10 minutes to the latest situation in Ukraine. Okay. Although that's now dropping off. That's now dropping off somewhat. I mean, at the beginning, it was like for the hourly newscast, they'd cover quite a lot. Now it's dropped off to about 5 or 6 minutes. But of course, it's still, for Taiwan, it's still international news on television, which is, that's something different.
Right. There's no pressure from the government one way or another to do more about Ukraine or do less.
Well, they can't really. There has been calls, of course, in some sectors, we'll say, for Taiwan to provide like military-related assistance, like bulletproof vests, for example. Not weapons systems, but obviously bulletproof vests and assistance. But I think the government has to tread a very fine line there when it's providing military type assistance to another country, because it could be accused of, it could face a lot of questions because it's Taiwan, if you see what I mean. They could only be bulletproof vests, but still a larger country to the north of Taiwan might get a bit antsy and accuse the government of actually supporting a side in the conflict with military related equipment.
I was thinking more of the Taiwan government putting any pressure on any of the news organizations to do more or less reporting about Russia and Ukraine.
Oh no, the government doesn't do that at all.
Okay.
So that's something that happened in the past. When you were here in the past, they did that. They don't do that anymore. The government do, of course, get a bit antsy with cable news channels and print media when they do certain things. Like if there's an election, they cover one particular candidate or one particular party too much, they'll get a bit antsy about that. But the war in Ukraine, the government is just, well, like I said, the media, whichever channel you watch, is covering the war in Ukraine. And while some channels have had people on from the other side of the fence, so to speak, that might have a more China-related opinion about Russia's war in Ukraine, most of it has been quite both-sided, if you see what I mean.
Okay. Well, great. I know you've got to rush. You've got a morning program you've got to take care of real quick here. I want to thank you very much for your time. Oh, and is there just anything else that you would like to add to this discussion? No.
No, I talk very quickly. I think I've covered it all.
It's always nice working with a pro, though. I'll tell you that. Gavin, thank you very much for taking time from your very busy schedule to be with us, and have a good day in Taiwan. Take care now.
Thank you.